And in Antakya, in the south of Turkey, the earthquake has reduced the city to remains. Euronews' international correspondent Annalise Borges is on the ground. Amidst the rubble, moments of joy and desperation as survivors are found alive after 90 hours, but hope for others fades.
Moldova's prime minister has announced that her government is resigning after a turbulent 18 months in power marked by economic turmoil and the war in Ukraine.
This place paints a pretty accurate picture of what's been happening in southern Turkey since last Monday. On one side, you've got workers and diggers constantly shifting through concrete blocks, through the rubble, trying to see if they can retrieve survivors or the remains of residents of this area. And on the other side, you've got hundreds of people sleeping out in the open, either camping out or mainly getting some blankets to cover themselves at night, burning whatever they can find to keep warm. It's very, very cold at night here. But this is pretty much the safest place for them. Authorities are asking them not to return to their homes. It's very dangerous. Even the buildings you see behind me that are still standing may need to be put down because the infrastructure has been compromised. Everywhere you look is someone that has been personally affected by this tragedy. Many here are waiting for news of their loved ones who might still be under the rubble. Aid has been arriving, but there is a certain degree of anger here. Many people saying that the response has been too slow. What is unanimous among people is just how different this place looks. We spoke to a man who was born and raised here in Antakya, and he says he can't get around anymore. He doesn't recognize his own city. Antakya is finished, he said. Annalise Borges from Antakya in southern Turkey for Euronews.
A moment of hope as a young boy is rescued alive after 88 hours of being underneath the rubble of a collapsed building in Hatay province in Turkey. And soon after, his father is also brought out alive. In the city of Antakya, 3 others were also rescued on Thursday evening after being buried for 90 hours. The devastating 7.8 magnitude earthquake first struck early Monday morning when people were asleep. Antakya was one of the hardest hit areas. Over in Syria, the search continues as hope of finding survivors fades. The UN says it's released more than 23 million euros to jumpstart the response to the war-torn country. The first aid convoy had reached rebel-held northwestern parts of Syria on Thursday, as thousands of families spent freezing nights in cars and makeshift tents.
Good morning, Secretary.
However, the UN Secretary-General says the country needs more.
Just hours ago, the first United Nations convoy crossed into northern Syria through the Bab al-Awa crossing. It included 6 trucks carrying shelter and other desperately needed relief supplies. More help is on the way, but much more is needed.
Meanwhile, 80 tons of humanitarian aid has been loaded onto a plane in Greece bound for Adana in southern Turkey. And the World Health Organization is sending health kits and medical equipment to both countries.
Turkey has experienced earthquakes before. It straddles several fault lines, but tremors of this magnitude in this particular region of the southeast of the country and northern Syria are rare.
Large earthquakes of about magnitude 7 in Turkey might happen between every few hundred years. They're more common in the north along a fault called the Northern Anatolian Fault than they are where this earthquake happened, where they may only happen every 500 years or so.
After the earthquake hit, thousands of buildings collapsed, adding to the devastation. And though modern structures are better equipped to withstand shaking, some of the region's older buildings crumbled. It's an ongoing problem, and governments have some difficult decisions to make.
If we do a thing called retrofitting, where we try to increase the capacity of these buildings to earthquake, the problem with that is it's quite expensive.
For now, it's a balancing act.
It's difficult because the earthquake, it might be 500 years until it happens again, right? So do you invest the money? Do you design your buildings? Do you retrofit all your buildings to withstand this kind of shaking? If you do, however, it does make a very big difference that the buildings are much less likely to collapse.
We only know for sure how good something is when the next earthquake strikes, because all that happens is that the earthquake finds the next weakest link in the chain.
At least 4 people have been killed in an explosion at a former factory in the Ukrainian capital on Thursday. Around 10 people were believed to have been inside the building when the blast happened. Alina's husband was working at the site at the time. She said that there was an explosion, but the location was unclear. She started to call her husband, but didn't manage to get him, so she went to see. Meanwhile, soldiers on the front line in Sumy, northeast of the country, are preparing for a new Russian offensive from their trenches. The Russian military is just over a kilometer away from the Ukrainian troops. This, as the UN's nuclear watchdog chief is in Moscow for talks on safety in Ukraine. There have been attacks around several facilities, raising fears of a nuclear incident.
The first round of voting last Sunday saw 2 leading candidates emerge. Front-runner Nikos Christodoulides, a former foreign minister, won the most votes. He'll be up against Andreas Mavroyiannis, who surprised many by coming second. Both have strategies for dealing with Turkey.
Καλάθη των ευρωτουρκικών, τα οποία είναι σαφώς σημαντικά για την Τουρκία, για την τουρκική κυβέρνηση, για την τουρκική κοινωνία, με πολιτικά, οικονομικά και κοινωνικά ωφέλη, εμείς είμαστε έτοιμοι να τα συζητήσουμε μαζί με το Κυπριακό, να τα συζητήσουμε όλα αυτά με την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση να έχει ένα πρωταγωνιστικό ρόλο.
Μέσα από μια διαφορετική προσέγγιση που θα είναι αμοιβαία επωφελής, αξιοποιώντας και αν θέλετε, τα εργαλεία που μπορεί να έχουμε στη διάθεσή μας, όπως είναι οι σχέσεις της Τουρκίας με την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση και όπως είναι και η κατάσταση στην Ανατολική Μεσόγειο, περιλαμβανομένου και του ζητήματος των υδρογοναθράκων.
Another pressing issue is on how best to deal with asylum seekers. More than 100,000 have arrived in Cyprus in the last 20 years.
Είναι ένα το να είναι δύσκολο και είναι άλλο να νομίζουμε ότι είναι λύση το να κάνουμε 20 χιλιόμετρα φράχτη σε μια γραμμή 200 χιλιόμετρων και να νομίζουμε ότι κάναμε οτιδήποτε. Ταχεία διεκπεραίωση των αιτήσεων, μιλάμε για μέρες και όχι για 6-8 χρόνια που έχουμε τώρα. Και μετά συστηματικός επαναπατρισμός.
Μία από τις πρώτες αποφάσεις του Υπουργικού Συμβουλίου θα είναι η σύσταση Υφυπουργείου Μετανάστευσης, το οποίο θα συστεγάσει όλες τις υπηρεσίες έτσι ώστε να γίνουν σαφώς πιο γρήγορες οι διαδικασίες μας. Σαφώς θα βοηθήσει στο να σταλεί το μήνυμα, αλλά θα είναι και στην πράξη, ότι η Κύπρος δεν είναι πλέον ελκυστικός προορισμός.
The outgoing head of state, Nikos Anastasiadis, has served for 2 consecutive 5-year terms.
More than 200 prisoners in Nicaragua's most notorious jails have landed at Dallas International Airport in Virginia after they were freed. Political leaders, priests, students and activists were among the group. The US State Department spokesman says freeing the dissidents is not part of a broader deal with the country's government. The Nicaraguan parliament has described the prisoners as traitors to the homeland and will strip them of their citizenship.
Moldova's pro-European government is collapsing after a year and a half of crisis and internal and external pressures. Prime Minister Natalia Gavrilița has announced her resignation, recalling that she took on an anti-corruption, pro-development and pro-European mandate, a mandate hampered by the geopolitics of the region. The invasion of neighboring Ukraine has triggered tensions in Moldova, also a former Soviet republic with a Russian-controlled separatist region, struggling to escape Moscow's influence. Gavrilica's term in office has been marked by problems like an acute energy crisis, skyrocketing inflation, and war-related incidents, such as missiles flying over its skies. The Moldovan parliament will have to approve the new government presented by President Maia Sandu, a politician that is set on her country, setting a course for Europe.
Only within the EU